Good afternoon, Judge Alex, and welcome to the F4 show.
Oh, great to be on with you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. We're going to be talking a little bit about your background and your life. It's very interesting because, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on in more depth, but you've been a police officer, a lawyer, a judge, and now a TV judge. So it's been a kind of accelerated career, I'd say.
Yes, well, I started very young. I became a police officer when I was 19 years old. I don't know what the average age is in Scotland, but in the U.S., most of the time, police departments won't hire you until you're 21. Even though in Florida the law is that you can become a police officer at 18, most departments won't hire you. And I was fortunate enough that I really wanted to be a police officer and pushed that they sent me to the academy, and I became a cop at 19. In fact, I was so young, and I still laugh at this, I was so young that I couldn't buy my own gun or my own bullets because you had to be 21 to buy a gun and to buy ammunition. The police department, of course, equips you with a gun, but you need an off-duty weapon for when you're not in uniform. And I actually had to take my mother with me to the gun shop and have her buy my off-duty weapon for me because I was too young to buy one. So I got a head start. Started early.
And I take you back right to the beginning of your life. You were actually born in Cuba, of all places.
Yes. I get. You always hear the phrase "the American dream," an American dream story. I don't know if that phrase is.
Yeah, we know what that means. Yeah, we know exactly what it means.
I really have had the good fortune to be an American dream story because my family came to Cuba when Castro took over and turned it into a communist country. My parents fled and brought their children, and so we started a new life in the U.S. and it was completely start over from scratch. My father had been an executive at a major company in Cuba, and his first job in the States was unloading railroad cars in the hot sun. So it was quite a change from the life that he had known, but he was able to, through hard work, and my mother used to, at lunchtime on her job, she'd run to a shoe store and sell shoes for an hour to make an extra buck. And through that hard work, they were able to claw their way up to where we once again became a middle-class family. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. And so I learned very early on that in the United States, if you're, as I'm sure in anywhere else in the UK, if you're willing to work hard and apply yourself, you can certainly advance your lot in life. And so I started working at a young age at 15, and I was in high school and worked my way through college and through law school and as a cop, and eventually became the youngest judge in Miami, and now one of a handful of TV judges in the entire country. So it really is a
success story.
But a success story, which is, I think, inspiring to kids when I go speak to them at school. That if I can make it, this little boy from Cuba, you guys ought to be able to slam it out of the park.
Your life would have been, if you'd stayed in Cuba, if your family had stayed in Cuba, because obviously you didn't make the decision, but your life would have been so different if your family had not decided to go to Miami. Could you even conceive about it, how it would be?
It would be so completely different. In fact, the Huffington Post asked me to write a piece they have a section called Latino Voices.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me to write a piece, and that's one of the things I wrote about was, the piece is called, if you want to Google it, it's called A Debt I Can't Repay. And it's basically about the opportunity that was given to me in the States and what it would be like if I stayed in Cuba. I mean, in Cuba, the government decides what your career is. They decide if you're a ditch digger, they decide if you're going to be a doctor. But even if I was fortunate enough that the government decided that I should be a doctor, the doctors in Cuba drive taxi cabs on their spare time to make enough money to feed their family. It's a completely different lifestyle. No freedom of speech. It would be a totally different world. So yes, it was a major opportunity and change for my family to and for America gratefully for America to open their arms to us and say, "Here, come on over."
Just for fun, off the top of your head, what do you think you would have ended up doing in Cuba if you'd stayed?
There's no telling. There's no telling because, as I said, the government's the one that decides. They decide based on your aptitude. They decide, or your connection. If you have friends in the communist government or whatever, they can say, "Hey, you know what? Grab a machete. Your job is out here in the sugarcane fields, cutting down sugarcane, or whatever." So there really is no telling. I mean, they took over all the private property that was there. Basically anybody who left the country, when they left the country, they were strip searched. And even little kids were taken behind a screen and stripped down to make sure the parents weren't hiding money or jewelry on them. And when you left Cuba, you couldn't take anything with you that had any value other than clothes. So they'd open your suitcases and they'd search you, and if you had wedding rings, they took them off your fingers. If you had any cash, they took it, and it all stayed behind. So, the government really controlled and still does. I mean, under Raul Castro, it's not much better. He's making pretenses, but there's no meaningful change. So it would have been up to the Cuban government to decide what my future was.
So happily, you landed in Florida, and you grew up in Florida. So what was life like, say, up to your teenage years?
Well, as I said originally, it was, of course, kind of rough, but I didn't know any different. I was very young. We had a house in the section of Miami called Little Havana, where a lot of Cuban immigrants moved in, which is still, that Little Havana area is still in existence, and very, very Hispanic, very Latin. Our house didn't have any air conditioning, which is, I'm sure, not a big deal in Scotland, but in Miami, summer here is like South Vietnam. It's extremely humid and hot. And, but again, I didn't know any better. It was only later on, as my parents, advanced and succeeded in their careers and made more money and moved us into better neighborhoods with better homes, that our lifestyle became comfortable, more comfortable, I should say. But it was me and my two brothers. Unfortunately, they both passed away. But me and my two brothers and my parents and my grandmother, all living in a little small house, and along with friends from Cuba who had also fled, and everybody kind of lived in the same Little Havana neighborhood. So it was like you see with a lot of immigrants, they tend to clump together in Chinatown or Little Havana or Little Italy because they haven't quite learned the language, and there's safety in your own kind. So that's how it started, of course. And then over the years we've assimilated, and my wife is American. Actually, she's Irish American. My children speak Spanish, but with some difficulties. Very fluent in English, obviously. That's their language.
So you get to 18 and suddenly you decide to become a police officer. What was behind that?
When I turned 18, I thought what I wanted to do was be a pilot. I always liked the idea of flying. And the funny thing is that my mother, by that point, worked for an airline, so we flew quite a bit. But every time I got on a plane as a passenger to fly, I got sick. I got airsick. So, what kind of an idiot thinks he can be an air 6 pilot? Well, that was me. I thought, what, I'll get over it. I could be a pilot. And I took flying lessons, and I got my pilot's license, and I cured myself of air sickness in the process. I'll spare you the details of my flight training, but when I finished and I had my pilot's license, I thought, this is a really good hobby. I like flying, but I don't think I would like to do it my whole life and constantly be, in other places while my family's here. So my grandfather had been a respected police officer in Cuba, very well liked, and I would see people come up to him in the street in Little Havana and say hello and hug him, and I liked the respect he got, and I thought, you know what, I think I would enjoy being a police officer. So that's when I started pushing for it, and I just, I was working, I got a job at a police department as a dispatcher, and I just kept pushing the chief to send me. And it's funny because when I speak to students, I talk about my life story because over and over and over again throughout my life, people have said no. They tell me, no, you're too young to be a cop. No, you're too young to be a judge. No, you can't go to law school and work full time. It's too hard. And, when I talk to students, I tell them, if you listen to people, they will be absolutely right if you listen to them. But throughout my whole life, I didn't listen to people. And I did what I wanted to do, and I pushed and pushed and pushed until they finally, out of either exhaustion or convincing, they would give in, and I would get my opportunity. And so I when I speak to students, I tell them it really is all about perseverance and education. You have to have the educational base, which my parents, when I became a cop, pulled me aside and said, look, you may want to be a police officer your whole life, and that's great. It's a noble career, but you may change your mind down the road. So all we would ask you to do is keep studying, get as much education as possible in case you change your mind, so that you will have options. And it sounded like good advice, and that's the advice I give to students, because as a result, when I finished law school, I was ready to do something different. I still love police work, but I was ready to do something different. And because I had kept studying, I had the option to do other things. I wasn't tied down to that career because I like other police officers that stopped studying once they became a cop, and they didn't really have a lot of options, and they felt they were trapped in their jobs. So I was able to become a lawyer. I was able to become a judge. I was able to now have a TV judge show, because the more education you have, the more options and choices, the more doors you can walk through in the future. And so that's how I ended up where I am today.
So as an 18-year-old, you at some point, 18, 19, they put you out on the streets, and you have to deal with what we call villains or criminals or whatever you want to call them. How did you command respect, as it were, at that young age? How did you get them to do what you wanted?
Well, I guess you're right about that. It's difficult. It's more difficult when you are a young police officer, because other people feel like, who is this 19-year-old, 20-year-old to tell me what to do? Granted, I was more mature at 19 than a lot of my friends. I mean, there are a lot of my friends that I would look at 19 and say, making them a cop is like giving a monkey a loaded gun. But I was considerably more mature, and I don't think I really looked 19. That being said, you're a police officer, you're in uniform. People tend to respect the uniform. If you don't, they're going to get arrested if they don't do. There was no choice around it. I would, if I told somebody they had to do something and they didn't do it, the only other option was arrest them. The thing about being a police officer is it's not supposed to be like a fair fight. If I tell somebody to do something and they're going to resist me, I'm going to pull out a nightstick. If they pull out a nightstick, I'm going to pull out a gun. And if it's just hand on hand and I can't control them myself, there's 200 other guys just like me and women who are going to come the minute I call for them. And one way or another, this person is going to go where they're supposed to go, because that's my job. So, it is harder. And when I became a judge, again, I had to go through it again, because a lot of lawyers looked at me, and here I was, the youngest judge in Miami, and a lot of lawyers looked at me like, why him? I've been a lawyer much longer than him, and you had to earn your respect by them realizing that you were good at what you do, that you knew the law, you were going to rule fairly, you were not going to allow them to take over your courtroom, and sooner or later they come around.
That's pretty good. Now, if you're out on the streets, so we here have a view of American policing, which is mainly based, partly on newspaper reports, but for honest, mainly based on the cop shows, which we get a lot here. I imagine that is actually the reality of it is slightly different. I've spent quite a bit of time in the States. There's lots of police officers you run into, and they're doing traffic and stuff like that, and very mundane things. Is that the reality of policing over there? Or is it a little bit more active than maybe our policing over here, which is not without its incident, but we don't have that heavy crime that we seem to get the impression goes on in the States?
Well, I think that we definitely have a different crime than you have. We have a gun culture in the U.S. That doesn't exist in the U.K. I mean, the U.S. was founded with guns. I mean, it was the wild, wild west, you know. So there's a totally different culture and different level of danger, I think. You're right that it is not the constant excitement that you see on television shows. I think most TV shows I've seen, the stuff that they show does happen. I mean, we do have gunfights. We do have armed robberies. We do have car chases. We do have all that stuff. It just doesn't all happen in a 1 hour period. You know, I think a friend of mine described it, one of the police officers I worked with described it well when he said police work is 90% boredom punctuated by 10% sheer terror. And I think that's probably a good description, because on your regular day, you know, it depends, of course, what unit you're on. You know, if you're just a traffic cop on a motorcycle, you're writing tickets all the time. You know, if that's what you like to do, great. You're just driving around and writing tickets, pulling people over for speeding, whatever. But most police officers have they're in a patrol car. They enforce traffic laws as well, but they're taking calls. You know, people will call in, say their car was stolen, or the house is broken into, and the officer shows up and he takes a report. He may call out the crime scene technician to dust for fingerprints or something. It becomes very routine, and then you get an in progress call. A call where a crime is happening now, an armed robbery in progress, a auto theft in progress, a rape in progress. That's where your adrenaline goes through the roof. That's where the lights and siren come on. That's where the risk is high. And you're dealing with people at gunpoint, and that's unfortunately where officers can get killed. They get killed in other scenarios too, because we get a call for domestic violence, a husband and wife fighting. You go respond for that. The emotions are high, and a lot of times when you're taking down the husband who was beating the wife, the wife grabs the knife and attacks the cop, because she all of a sudden realizes that, wait a minute, I know I called them, but they're going to take away my breadwinner. They're taking away my husband here, and so it's even those kind of cases where you think like, okay, I know who the bad guy is. You have to watch your back. So yeah, crime in the U.S. is different than in the U.K., but police officers all over the world, whether in the U.K., whether in Scotland or the U.S., it's a dangerous job. I saw a video, I think just yesterday, of a police officer who was doing a traffic stop, and while he's talking to the driver, some woman walks up to him and tries to stab him in the back with scissors. She actually does, but he has a bulletproof vest on and it doesn't penetrate it. And she apparently had been on some medications and had taken some alcohol and had a psychotic episode of some sort. So no matter where you are in the world, if you're a police officer, you're putting your life at risk.
Can I just say for the folks at home that I've lived in the States quite a lot on and off before the 2000s, and I don't think I ever encountered any crime directly.
Yeah, I live in Miami, Florida, and I would say that there are many people, if not most people, are not victims. I mean, somebody may steal something of yours. You may find that your car's gone one morning. But most of the time, we have bad areas, just like I'm sure Scotland has bad areas in particular towns where crime is higher. That tends to be where people are poorer, because I think people who live in ghettos or in poor areas and don't see a lot of hope for advancement or to get out or to succeed. Desperation sets in, and I think they're the people who are more likely to commit violent crimes. They're the ones who are more likely to rob you, because they don't really have another way in their mind of getting out of the hood, as they say. So I think just about everywhere you have that potential. Obviously, if you're in a high crime area like that, your chances of being victimized go up.
A little bit higher. Okay. Your average tourist is probably pretty well protected there.
Yes. Tourists are certainly, of course, more at risk because they don't know the lay of the land. And for years, many years ago, we had this problem with tourists who were coming into town, and they would rent a rental car, and rental cars had stickers on them that they were rentals, and then you had these criminals who were leaving the the bad part of town going over to the airport and following the rental cars and, crashing into them with a stolen car to, kind of like, oh, we had an accident, and then robbing them when they pulled over. That's kind of been eradicated. It was just kind of a period of time where there were arrests of those happening. They figured out it was a good system for robbing tourists. And that's been eradicated. The rental cars no longer let on that they're rental cars, and there's been a lot more enforcement. So, but tourists, of course, not knowing the area are at more risk.
Let's switch the conversation slightly. You've chosen some pretty heavy-duty professions to follow through on. You're police officer, lawyer, which probably was a little bit more peaceful, and then you move into becoming a judge. Now, we're familiar here mainly with Judge Judy, who is on a national television program here, and she has a kind of much milder background, but you've actually tried some very heavy-duty cases in Florida when you became a judge.
Yes. And Judy's show, if you're familiar with Judy's show, it's identical to mine, except for, of course, the personality of the judge. The same type of cases, we have the same type of litigants who appear in front of us, and then the difference is really how the judge handles it, how the judge, their personality and things like that. As a criminal court judge in Miami, I did criminal and family. I did have some big cases. One of them was just turned into a movie last year. I don't know if they have it in the UK, but it was a movie with Mark Wahlberg and The Rock called Pain and Gain. And it was about these bodybuilders who basically were kidnapping wealthy people, trying to take them for everything they had and then killing them. And I'm sure you can get it on DVD or download it, but it was an interesting case. And if you watch the movie, it's pretty darn accurate. People shake their head when they watch the movie and they go, that can't be real. And I say to them, yeah, it actually is real. The case was the longest criminal prosecution in Miami's history. It was a trial that I tried. It lasted 4.5 months. The Michael Bay, the director who did Armageddon and Bad Boys, he turned it kind of into a comedy because the personality of the perpetrators, the two bodybuilders, he kind of made him a bit of a buffoon, but that's based on fact. They were kind of stupid meatheads, and the lawyers would come sidebar in the middle of the case to talk to me about scheduling and things like that, and I'd just shake my head and look at him and say, "Are you kidding me?" And they would just chuckle. We would laugh sidebar. It was a horrible case of murders and stuff, but the actions of their bodybuilder clients were so dumb that you had to laugh, and I think they kind of took that and made the personality of the movie. And it's an entertaining movie to see, and very violent. I'll tell you that right now. If you don't want to see a violent movie, don't watch that one. But kind of funny at the same time. That was a case that I tried. I tried another case that was covered nationwide about a girl who disappeared. 17 years old, hitchhiking. She just disappeared, and her mother started getting calls 2 weeks later from a man who said, "I've got your daughter, and I'm doing this to her, and I'm doing that to her, and I'm going to sell her to a bunch of people who are looking for slave women." And the calls continued for 21 years. For 21 years. If you look back now, what you were doing 21 years ago, that's when the calls started. And the guy would call from different payphones at the time, but we had a lot of payphones and less cellular phones then. And they would stake out the payphone, and he'd call from a different one, and it just never stopped. That was another amazing case. We wrote a book about it called Without a Trace. And it turned out that the guy who was calling had nothing to do with her disappearance. He was a decorated U.S. Customs agent who just got off on making those kinds of phone calls to women whose children were missing. It was very sick, very twisted, and a bizarre case. But Miami has a lot of strange crime, and I tried a lot of strange cases as a criminal court judge.
And from there you get into something lighter, well, I'd call it lighter anyway, which is being a TV judge. And so what led you into that?
Well, I was at a point in my career where I wanted to get off of the criminal court bench. I was in family court for a while, and I just said, I'm ready to make a change. And that's what I said about education. It gives you the option to make changes. And so I put my name in for the appeals court, and it's a very sought-after position, being an appellate judge. It's kind of like the elephant's graveyard. It's where judges go to die. You know, once they become an appellate judge, they don't leave it. You're more like I compare it to being a detective. You know, to me, a trial judge is like a patrol officer, a police officer. A appellate judge is like a detective. The police officer and the trial judge have to make decisions on the spot. They're instantaneous. You as a judge, you have an objection. You have to rule on it on the spot. The appellate judge is more like a detective that comes in after the fact, looks at the transcript, looks at the evidence, pontificates, writes their opinion, their analysis. And I said, you know what? I think I want to change. I want to get off of this hot seat. I've been doing it long enough, and every day it's who raped their neighbor, who killed their sister, and that's the kind of stuff that you don't want to do the rest of your life. And I put my name in for the appeals court, and a lot of partners at law firms and other judges, it's very, very competitive, put their names in. And I was fortunate enough that the panel that interviews you and recommends you to the governor for appointment is made up of 9 people. They recommended me with a unanimous 9 yes votes. Everybody else received a split: 6 yes, 3 no, 5 yes, 4 no. And so it looked going into it like I was the front runner. There were 3 vacancies, which is unheard of because that never happens. Usually you get 1 vacancy every couple of years. And everybody basically said, look, you're going to get one of the vacancies. You're a former police officer, and the governor at the time, Ted Bush, he was very pro-law enforcement. You're Hispanic, and he's very pro-minority appointment because the bench was completely underrepresented by minorities. You've been on the bench for 10 years, so they can see what your work is like, and you're the only one that got 9 unanimous votes. So it looked really good. I was 2 weeks away from the appointment from the interview with the governor and then the appointment. And television called. Some producers had seen me handling cases that were like the Pain and Gain case, that bodybuilder case, and the other one that were covered on television. And they saw the way I handled myself, and they said, I think this guy would be good as a TV judge. And they approached me to do a TV court show, which was a major fork in the road for me because, here I would be passing up an opportunity to be an appellate judge to do television, which I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in the US, 8 out of every 10 new shows fail. And those are involving people who do this for a living, they're in the television industry. So I could give up my career, do a TV show that lasts 1 year, and then be off the bench and have no TV show. So it was a very big risk. But, of course, it was certainly much more lucrative than being a state court judge. The taping schedule was very quick. I taped a lot of cases in a short period of time, and then I had the rest of the year off. So my kids were getting ready to go to college, and I thought, well, you know what? This is an opportunity before they leave the nest to be able to spend some time with them, be able to take them on vacations that, I might not otherwise afford. And that was the deciding point. And I withdrew my name from the governor, and we jumped into the television industry, and it's been a success. 9 years later, we're still on the air. We were the highest rated new daytime show in syndication, beating out 2 new shows that came out with very well-known talent like Tyra Banks and Martha Stewart. They both launched at the same time I did, and we beat them handily. And so it was a good decision, but it was certainly a risky one.
Would you say that it lightened your life a lot by getting away from the heavy-duty stuff?
It did. I think that, dealing with that serious crime every day, and police officers deal with it, judges, criminal defense or prosecutors, criminal defense lawyers or prosecutors, they deal with that all the time, and it's a lot to take home. It's like layers of paint on you. Every serious crime where you see people devastated, their loved ones have been killed, and sometimes it's children. It's like a coat of paint on top of you. And I just was ready to get away from it. It's not like I came in there not knowing what to expect, because of course I'd been a police officer. So, there were other judges who had never dealt with that in their lives, and all of a sudden they were dealing with some very, very serious stuff. So, it was definitely a need for a change after many years of that.
One of the reasons that I invite you on the show, because I obviously found you by checking you out on YouTube, because I actually don't have a TV at home. I just watch a little bit of YouTube once in a while. But I noticed from YouTube videos, which is the same as the TV show more or less, that a couple of things. One is you seem to have a tremendous sense of humor and able to keep the courtroom light. But the major reason for me is that you seem to command respect in that courtroom. Plus, you seem to genuinely, and the word is, discern the facts. It's like somehow see that your mind works very quickly. You're able to take the information in. Is that through experience, or is that something you were naturally born with, that ability to deal factually with things and probably a little bit less emotionally than maybe some of the rest of us do it?
Well, I don't know. I would guess that it's probably some of both. I think that some people are born a little more intuitive than other people, but certainly my experience as a police officer and as a lawyer and as a judge gives me different perspectives from which to analyze what I'm being told. Somebody's telling me, well, this is what the officer did. I know from experience whether an officer would do that or wouldn't do that, whereas another judge might not have any inside information to question it. So I think having all those perspectives makes it easier for me to get to the bottom of things. I do have a sense of humor, and I think that's one of the things they liked about me. I can joke. Sometimes I'm rather quick-witted, but I can turn on them on a dime, I should say. If I don't like what they did, or I don't like, or if they're, one thing I don't tolerate is disrespect in my courtroom. So if they're disrespectful with me, I shut them down in a heartbeat. I do believe that you have to have respect for authority. Authority's not always right. You certainly can take it up, on appeal or file a complaint, but I think that you have to have that respect for authority, because we're countries of laws, and you have to respect the laws and then seek to change them and in the proper ways. So I demand that in the courtroom. I demand that people behave. I do give them a little more looseness than I would in my courtroom in Miami, because at the end of the day, it's entertainment. It's on television.
Yeah, I have seen a couple of people sing to you there.
Somebody comes in and they're suing. They were suing because they entered into a contract to make a record, and the person took advantage of them and then backed out of the deal and all this, and they wanted to sing to me. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll listen to you. And it's part of the entertainment that I enjoy. And that's the thing. I would say that I run my courtroom the same as I would in Miami, except that I actually get to speak my mind. I get to tell people when I think they're full of it. I get to tell them when I don't believe them, as opposed to usually as a judge, you're restrained. You sit back, you listen, and you don't really comment much on the evidence. I get to do that. It's very liberating. It's very liberating to call people out who hurt somebody or who did something wrong to somebody. That's something that I actually enjoy about my show.
Now, if you look at the natural progression of your career, you seem to change careers every few years. What's next for you after daytime television and your own courtroom on TV?
I think I'm going to go to Scotland and have a radio show.
You'd be most welcome here. I tell you what we'll do. If you promise to keep Jeremy Kyle over there, we'll have you here as long as you want to stay. Yeah, don't tell us.
You guys want to stretch that vacation as long as you
you can keep them as long as you want. This radio station, we can say what we want.
I'm not one of those people who plans their career. There are some people who say, well, in 6 years, I'm going to be a partner at this law firm, and then in 12 years, I'm going to open up my own firm, and I never did that. I'm the kind of person who stumbles through life. I do something, I was a a police officer until I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I was a lawyer until I realized I didn't want to do that the rest of my life, and I decided to become a judge. And I was a judge until an opportunity came on to be a TV judge. And I just kind of move with the flow. If I like something, I do it. If I stop liking it, I start looking for something else. And that's what education gives you, the opportunity to have those options.
I'm thinking for you, daytime TV talk show host. What do you think about that?
Well, I've been approached for that. That's not an easy gig. That's not to say I couldn't do it, because I've always been one to take on things, and I've been lucky enough to be successful at anything I've taken on. That's not to say that I haven't, been passed over. There are times when before I ran for judge, I sought an appointment, and they thought I was too young, and they passed over on me because they felt like, nah, you're too young to be a judge. And so you could consider those failures. When I talk to students, I tell them, look, it's not like everything has been a success in my life. I was passed over for judge. A law firm that I worked for was never going to make a former cop from Miami, the national law firm. They were never going to make me partner. But those failures, if you want to call them that, led me to do something else. They led me to run for judge, where I was elected and became the youngest judge in Miami. They led me to open up my own law firm, where I tripled my already clearly overpaid salary. So when I talk to them, I say, so when you look at it, how much did those failures really affect my life? When I look back at my life now, not at all. But at the time, they seemed monumental. So I've been approached about doing talk show. I don't know if I ever will. We've talked about it. We've batted it around. I think I would be good at it, but I can't guarantee that.
I'm pretty sure you're already trained for it, to be honest. You'd just be interviewing the good guys rather than the bad guys.
Yeah, well, maybe you may be right. But if the opportunity comes up, I probably would. I'm in talks with networks about other possible show ideas, and I'm open to trying new things all the time. So I'd be happy to. If I got an offer to do a show in the UK, I would be over there, absolutely, because I love the UK. I love the people of the UK. I think they're so nice. I mean, obviously everybody's not nice, but I mean in general they're very civilized and very nice people. And I would enjoy flying over there and doing a show. It'd be fantastic.
Well, I tell you what, come over here and practice, and then we'll let you loose on the United States after that.
There you go. I'd be happy to do that. Some interest over there for me. I'm on the next flight.
Well, I said it off the air, but I think you'd be a natural for Dave, which is a TV channel over here that everybody knows and watches. I think your show from the States would do pretty good on there, but I'll let you work that one out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have some different show ideas that I think might appeal to the UK, but it's a matter of getting my agent to talk to people over there who might be of interest. So if you know anybody at Dave, hook me up. Listen,
if you'd like to get in touch with Judge Alex, he has a Twitter feed. What's your Twitter?
My Twitter is at Judge Alex Ferrer. So my last name is Ferrer.
I think if I just search for Judge Alex, I'll find you actually.
Yeah. If you go to judgealex.com, that's our show page. There's a little link for Facebook and for Twitter. If you click on the Twitter link, it takes you to at Judge Alex Ferrer, my Twitter page. At least as I should anyway. There's another one for the show called at Judge Alex TV, but that's the show one. If you click on the Facebook one, it should take you to my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Judge Alex TV. So you can go to either of those. I chat with my fans online all the time.
Someone's blogging about you in the UK?
Oh, it's the blog is, of course, it knows no borders. It's a journalist, a writer by the name of Jackie Jaci Stevens, and she's written for the Daily Mail, and she's always been a fan of the show, and so years ago she interviewed me. She has a blog called L.A. Not So Confidential. I guess a spoof on the movie L.A. Confidential. I think it's lanotsoconfidential.com. And she writes about me all the time. And she's a sweetheart. We've become friends. She has a great sense of humor too. So I get a chuckle out of reading her blog.
Judge Alex, I really want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us today. We've got one final question that we have to ask you because you're in Florida, and that is, what's the weather like there?
It's sunny. It's about 85 degrees, 83 degrees. It's going into the moon season. You know, summer here can be really hot, really humid, but right now it's not so bad.
83 degrees Fahrenheit in the States is 26 degrees Celsius here, which is magnificently warm. We would like that here. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we look forward to you coming over here and presenting something, anything, on British TV, British radio sometime in the future.
I would love it, David. Thanks for the invitation.